In the grand halls of a mansion that symbolized triumph and wealth, there lived a boy who seemed forgotten by the world around him. While his father brokered deals and counted fortunes, the boy's world was small, reduced to the glass of a single window and the shadows beyond it. Each day he pressed his face close, his lips parting only to whisper the same chilling refrain. "Mommy." Again. There. To anyone else, it was nothing but a harmless repetition, a fragment of an autistic child's mind lost in its own echo. But repetition is never meaningless when it is so precise, so relentless, so tied to one fixed point in space. For years, those words hung in the air like smoke, and for years they were ignored. The father looked away, the staff dismissed it, and life carried on, until one woman refused to let those whispers drift unanswered. Her name was never written in the family's history books, nor mentioned in their glossy interviews, but the new maid became the single thread that pulled apart the entire tapestry of lies. What she uncovered beyond that window was not an illusion, not a child's wandering fantasy, but a truth carefully hidden, sealed under years of silence and denial. And when it surfaced, it did not come quietly. It clawed its way into the light with such force that it shattered reputations, exposed betrayal, and tore apart a family that had built its image on strength. This was no child's game. It was a warning, a clue, a plea that the world had refused to hear. And by the time they listened, it was already too late. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Why was the boy always pointing to the same spot in the garden day after day, never distracted, never moved by the changing seasons? Why did his small hand rise to the glass each time he whispered, "Mommy," again, there, as though he was trying to direct someone, anyone, to see what he saw? For years his father dismissed it, branding it as nothing more than the restless echoes of a mind he struggled to understand. But deep inside, was he truly convinced of that? Or was he avoiding a truth that terrified him more than any deal gone wrong, more than any empire crumbling? Sometimes the most painful realities are the ones we bury under silence. And then came the new maid. Unlike the others, she did not dismiss the whispers or turn her head away when the boy's hand pressed against the window pane. She listened. She watched. And slowly, she began to notice what everyone else had chosen to ignore. What she discovered did not just challenge the father's denial, it threatened to dismantle everything he thought was secure. Stay with us, because this is not just a story about loss, it is a story about secrets buried in plain sight. Theo was different from the moment he could walk. Diagnosed on the spectrum at an early age, he found comfort in patterns the world dismissed as meaningless. He lined up his toys in perfect rows, repeated the same melodies under his breath, and most of all, fixed his gaze on that one corner of the garden through the wide glass window. His words were few, but they carried a strange persistence. "Mommy." Again. There. Yet, in the echo of his voice, no one in the house heard a call for help. To the staff, Theo was a task, a routine, a quiet background presence in a mansion that prized appearances over understanding. He was misunderstood, ignored, and too often left to drift inside his own silence. What no one saw was that his silence was speaking louder than anyone dared to believe. Lucas, his father, was a man forged by ambition and hardened by loss. He had risen from modest beginnings to become a millionaire, celebrated for his sharp mind and relentless drive. But when tragedy struck, the death of his wife, the woman who had once anchored his restless spirit, something inside Lucas shut down. His grief calcified into coldness. He told himself he was protecting Theo by refusing to dwell on the past, but in reality, he was protecting himself from the pain of remembering. The boy's words, tied so hauntingly to the memory of his mother, were too heavy to bear. So Lucas chose the easier path. Denial. Business became his escape. Boardrooms became his refuge, and money became the armor shielding him from emotions he could not confront. Around them, The household staff moved like shadows, efficient, silent, indifferent. They polished the marble floors, served the meals, and kept the machinery of the estate running smoothly. But when Theo pressed his small hand against the glass and whispered into the silence, they lowered their eyes, turned their backs, and carried on. For them, he was a reminder of something fragile in a house built to look invincible. Their indifference did not come from cruelty, but from a learned obedience. Do not question, do not disrupt, do not dig into matters the master of the house chooses to ignore. And so, Theo's whispers drifted unanswered, like dust caught in the light, until Maya arrived. She was new to the household, stepping into the grand estate with no history of its unspoken rules. Compassion was her nature, curiosity her quiet strength. Where others heard meaningless repetition, Maya paused and listened. She noticed the way Theo's eyes never wavered from that patch of garden, the way his tone shifted when he said "mommy," as though it was not habit but memory. In a world that had silenced him, she became the only one willing to hear. And in her willingness, the first cracks began to form in the walls of denial Lucas had so carefully built. Theo's habit was not random, it was a key, and Maya was about to turn it. As the weeks passed, Theo's ritual grew stronger. Each morning before breakfast, he would slip quietly from his chair and shuffle toward the tall window that overlooked the garden. His small hand pressed against the glass, his body leaning forward, and then came the whisper. Soft, steady, and unchanging. "Mommy." Again. There. At first, Maya thought it was a habit born from grief, the residue of a boy who missed the mother he could barely remember. But the more she watched, the more she realized it was not random. His timing was precise, his words deliberate, his eyes unblinking. The garden held him, almost as if it was calling him back each day. Maya did not dismiss it like the others. She lingered in the doorway, watching carefully, listening intently, her own instincts telling her that something about this ritual demanded attention. The staff had grown used to ignoring it, brushing past with trays and towels, shaking their heads when asked about it. Lucas buried himself in business calls, determined to drown out the whispers that pierced his carefully constructed silence. But Maya was different. She did not rush past. She crouched beside Theo sometimes, speaking softly, though he rarely answered. Still, she paid attention. She saw how his small fingers trembled as they pressed against the cold glass, how his lips quivered when he whispered the word, "Mommy," with a longing that no routine could explain. The window had become a boundary, and beyond it, a truth waited, silent yet heavy. One afternoon, as the sky dimmed with early shadows, Theo's ritual reached its breaking point. His whisper, usually soft and muffled, rose into something sharper, louder, urgent enough to make Maya freeze where she stood. "Mommy." Again. There. The words carried a weight that could not be ignored. This was not the sound of a boy repeating a phrase for comfort. It was the sound of a plea, a cry buried under years of silence. Maya's heart quickened. She glanced at the other staff, but they moved on as though nothing had happened. For them, it was background noise. For her, it was a signal. At that moment, Maya made her decision. She would follow his finger, step beyond the glass, and into the garden where Theo's eyes had been fixed for so long. She waited until the house quieted, until Lucas retreated into his office, and then, with steady breath, she slipped out through the back door. Each step across the manicured lawn carried her closer to the corner Theo had never stopped pointing to. And as the evening light deepened, Maya realized this was not curiosity alone. It was the beginning of something she might never be able to turn away from. The evening air carried a strange stillness as Maya walked with Theo across the lawn. His small hand clutched hers, tugging gently, guiding her toward the corner he had never stopped pointing to. The garden, once perfectly manicured under Lucas's orders, showed signs of neglect in this forgotten corner. Vines crept along cracked stone, weeds pushed through the earth, and the scent of damp soil clung to the air. And there, half hidden by overgrowth, stood an old swing set. Its metal frame, once painted bright, was now rusted, its chains sagging, its seat weathered by years of abandonment. Theo's eyes lit up, his lips parting as though he recognized a piece of his past. For the first time, he broke free from the glass barrier and stood before the place that had anchored his whispers. His hands trembled as he touched the rusted chain, and in that moment, his connection to his mother became undeniable. Maya crouched beside him, watching as Theo swayed the swing gently, whispering again, "Mommy." Again. There. But this time, there was something different in his tone, not only longing but certainty. His gaze didn't wander, it locked on the earth beneath the swing as though something lay hidden there. Maya's heart ached. She knew Lucas would not want this uncovered. He had sealed himself away from grief, refusing to face reminders of his wife. Yet here was his son, pulling the memory back into the present with every word, every gesture. Maya felt that this was more than nostalgia, more than a child reaching for fragments of comfort. Something lingered in this place, and Theo could feel it. At first, Maya thought perhaps it was only the swing, an object tied to happier days, moments shared with his mother before she was gone. But then, as she looked closer, unease stirred within her. Around the swing's base, the soil looked uneven, disturbed in ways the rest of the garden was not. The weeds bent oddly, patches of dirt darker than others, as though the ground had been tampered with long after the swing had been abandoned. Maya's eyes narrowed, her breath shallow. Was this truly just a memory? Or had someone returned here for reasons no one else dared to question? It was then, at the edge of fading daylight, that Maya noticed the detail that chilled her more than the rusted swing or the uneven soil. Just beyond the weeds, pressed faintly into the earth, were footprints. Not old, not eroded by rain, but recent. Alongside them, caught on a thorn bush, a strip of torn fabric fluttered softly in the breeze. She froze, the weight of realization sinking in. Theo was not only remembering, someone else had been here too. And if the ground told the truth, this forgotten corner of the garden was not nearly as abandoned as Lucas had led everyone to believe. When Maya first gathered her courage to tell Lucas what she had found, she chose her words carefully. She spoke of Theo's whispers, of his fixation on the corner of the garden, of the rusted swing and the disturbed soil beneath it. Lucas listened in silence at first, his expression unreadable, his hand tightening around the glass of scotch he always carried at the end of the day. Then, with a sharp exhale, he dismissed it. "Theo doesn't know what he's saying," Lucas told her, his voice clipped. "He repeats things, it's nothing. Don't indulge it." His tone carried finality, as though he had drawn a line that Maya was never meant to cross again. But deep inside, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear perhaps, or the weight of something he did not want unearthed. For Lucas, silence was safety, and anyone who broke it was a threat. The staff too seemed to sense that Maya was crossing into dangerous ground. One evening, as she lingered in the hallway, another maid whispered to her in hushed tones, "Don't dig into things. The master doesn't like it." The warning was not cruel, but cautionary, born of the quiet obedience that had long ruled the house. To them, questioning was not loyalty, it was survival. Maya nodded, but the unease only grew. Why would a simple curiosity about a child's whispers warrant such warnings? Why did the garden corner carry the weight of something unspoken? The more she was told to stay away, the more certain she became that Theo's whispers were leading her closer to a truth no one wanted revealed. Meanwhile, Theo had begun to change. Once quiet and withdrawn, his world slowly opened in the presence of Maya's patience. He reached for her hand more often, spoke a few words beyond his usual whispers, and followed her with trusting eyes. For the first time, someone listened to him without dismissal. The bond between them grew stronger, and through that bond, Theo's voice carried a new intensity. "Mommy, again." "There," he said with more certainty than ever, almost as though her presence gave him the courage to make others hear. For Maya, there was no turning back. She could not abandon him now. To her, Theo was not a puzzle to be ignored, but a child pointing to a truth the world refused to see. Then came the night that changed everything. The mansion slept under a cloak of silence, but Maya's rest was broken by a sound outside her window, a faint rustle, deliberate, too heavy for the wind. She rose quietly, careful not to wake the others, and drew back the curtain. At first she saw only the outline of the garden under moonlight, but then, at the farthest corner, near the rusted swing where Theo always pointed, a figure moved. It was tall, shadowed, purposeful, standing where no one had reason to be at that hour. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the figure bent low, as though searching or hiding something, before slipping back into the darkness. She blinked, but it was gone. Someone else knew about that corner of the garden. Someone was watching it, guarding it, or perhaps returning to it under cover of night. The following evening, Maya could no longer ignore what she had seen. Sleep offered no escape, only the replay of that shadowed figure by the rusted swing. She waited until the house quieted, then slipped out with nothing but a lantern in hand. The garden, once haunting in its stillness, seemed to hold its breath as she moved closer to the corner Theo always pointed to. Each step crunched over overgrown weeds, each breath fogged in the cool night air. Then, behind the swing, she heard it again, the faint rustle, the sound of someone trying not to be found. Maya steadied herself, lifted the lantern and whispered, "Who's there?" What emerged from the shadows was not what she expected. Not a prowler, not a servant sneaking about, but a little girl. Thin, pale, her dress torn at the seams. Dirt streaked her cheeks, and her wide eyes reflected both fear and desperation. She shrank back at first, shielding her face, until Theo appeared beside Maya, drawn by instinct rather than sound. And then, something extraordinary happened. The girl's fear melted the moment she saw him. She stepped forward, timid but sure, and reached out as though she had always known him. Theo, who struggled with words, did not retreat. He reached back, and for the first time, he smiled. The connection between them was undeniable. They began to play, not with words, but with gestures, laughter, and the kind of innocence only children share. Theo guided her toward the swing, pointing at it as if introducing her to something sacred. The girl nodded, almost as though she understood the whispers he had been repeating all along. "Mommy." "Again. There," Theo said with a clarity that startled Maya. The girl didn't flinch. She only looked at him with recognition, as if she had heard those words before. Who was she? How did she know Theo? And why had she been hiding in the shadows of this house, malnourished and alone? Maya's heart ached with both fear and compassion. She knew she could not keep this a secret. The girl needed help. And yet, she sensed this revelation was dangerous. The next morning, with both children at her side, she presented the girl to Lucas. His reaction was immediate and chilling. He froze at the sight of her, color draining from his face. For a moment, silence stretched across the grand hall. Then his voice cracked like a whip. "Take her away. Now." His words were not those of a man shocked into concern. They were sharp, commanding, laced with panic. Theo clung to the girl, refusing to let go, while Lucas's eyes darted to the garden as if calculating what else might be uncovered. And in that instant, a new mystery erupted. Why did the presence of this frail, frightened child provoke such fury? What was Lucas hiding, and why did he want her gone before anyone asked who she really was? The girl had finally been seen, but Lucas demanded she be erased. After Lucas's furious demand to have the girl taken away, Maya realized she could no longer trust the house around her. The staff's eyes followed her every move, their silence heavy with unspoken warnings. Yet the bond between Theo and the mysterious child only deepened. Theo, who rarely smiled, began to laugh with her. He held her hand as if he had always known she belonged. And the whispers at the window grew louder, clearer, almost purposeful. "Mommy. Again?" There. Maya's instincts told her that if she wanted answers, she would have to search where no one else dared. Late one night, when Lucas was away on business and the staff had retired, she crept into the locked study at the far end of the east wing. The air was stale with dust, the shelves lined with forgotten ledgers and leather-bound volumes. She rifled through drawers, careful not to leave a trace, until she stumbled upon a box wrapped in faded silk. Inside lay photographs of Lucas's late wife. She was radiant, her smile tender, her eyes filled with the warmth that had been stripped from the mansion since her passing. But alongside these photos were letters, handwritten, fragile with age, letters that spoke of strain, of distance, and of secrets that had never left the marriage. Some mentioned nights when Lucas was absent for days at a time. Others carried pleas from his wife, begging him to explain where he had been and why he kept things from her. One line froze Maya in place. "If you think hiding her will protect this family, you are wrong. One day, truth will return to this house." Hiding her. The words rang louder than the silence of the room. Maya's pulse quickened. Could this child, the one Theo had embraced without hesitation, be the her the wife had written about? Driven now, Maya dug deeper. In the bottom of the box lay a small folded paper, nearly crumbling with age. It was a hospital record. The date matched the day Theo had been born. But there, beneath his name, was another, scribbled faintly as though someone had tried to erase it. A second child. A girl. The proof Maya had feared and hoped for all at once. Theo had not been born alone. His mother had delivered twins. Her hands trembled as she pieced the fragments together. The girl hiding in the garden was not a stranger. She was family. Perhaps a half-sister from an affair, or perhaps, more chillingly, Theo's twin, hidden away, erased from the story Lucas wanted the world to believe. As Maya clutched the hospital record, she heard the faint creak of the study door behind her. Someone else was awake. Someone knew she had found the truth. The silence in the mansion was heavy, broken only by Theo's soft murmurs at the window. Maya, clutching the hospital record, could no longer contain the truth she carried. But before she could confront Lucas, it was the girl herself who stepped forward. Fragile, barefoot, her eyes wide yet calm, she spoke in a trembling voice. For years, she said, she had lived in the shadows, hidden from the world, sneaking into the garden when she dared. The overgrown corner near the swing had been her refuge, a place where she felt her mother's presence most strongly. Theo's strange ritual, the pointing, the whispers of "Mommy," again, there. They were not the ramblings of a lonely child. They were memories. Theo remembered the days when his mother had pushed him on that very swing, and he remembered the girl, his sister, standing nearby, her laughter mingling with their mother's. He had never forgotten, though the adults around him dismissed his words as meaningless. He had been trying to bring them back together, pointing not at empty space, but at a bond that had never died. When Lucas was finally confronted, the mask he had worn for years cracked. His denial was fierce at first. He claimed the girl was an intruder, that she had no place in the mansion, that Theo's mind was playing tricks. But the hospital record in Maya's hands was undeniable, and the girl's face, her resemblance to the late wife, was a truth that could not be silenced. Under the weight of Maya's determination and Theo's unwavering loyalty to his sister, Lucas finally confessed. He admitted that he had known all along. The girl had been born alongside Theo, but in the chaos of his wife's complicated labor and his own pride, he had made a decision that would haunt him forever. Fearing scandal, fearing judgment, and consumed by the rigid image of wealth and control he so desperately clung to, Lucas allowed the world to believe there was only one child. The girl was cast aside, hidden, raised in secret, her existence denied. The room shook not with sound, but with the enormity of his guilt. Maya's voice, steady and resolute, forced Lucas to face the one truth he had buried. Theo's love for his sister had never waned. Every time he whispered at the window, every time he pointed to the garden, it was not madness. It was memory. It was truth. And yet, even in this revelation, one question loomed larger than all others. Now that the secret was exposed, what would Lucas do? Cling to his pride, or embrace the family he had spent years denying? For the first time in his young life, Theo's world began to make sense. The words he had repeated again and again at the window, words so often dismissed, silenced, or ignored, were not meaningless after all. They were fragments of a truth that no one had wanted to hear. Mommy, again. There had always been his plea to remember, his desperate attempt to bring his mother's memory back into the home and to point toward the sister he had never forgotten. As the revelation unfolded, Lucas, once so stern, so controlled, so unreachable, could no longer contain the storm within him. The facade of wealth, the coldness of pride, the iron mask of denial, all of it broke in a single night. His voice faltered, his body shook, and for the first time in years, tears streamed down his face. He admitted what he had feared to confess, that he could not bear the weight of shame, that he had believed burying the past would allow him to preserve the life he had built. But in hiding the truth, he had not only betrayed his wife's memory, he had abandoned one child and wounded the heart of the other. In that moment, it was Maya who held the fragile pieces together. She guided Theo toward his sister, their small hands linking as though they had always been one. And she urged Lucas to look at them, not as reminders of the life he had tried to control, but as the very family he had almost lost forever. It was not easy, but in the stillness of the night, Lucas's heart softened. He reached out, pulling both children close, his brokenness laid bare in the act of finally embracing what he had denied. But just when the story seemed to find its resolution, Maya noticed something among the letters she had uncovered. A line in the late wife's handwriting stood apart from the rest. It was written not with anger, nor with pleading, but with quiet, chilling certainty. If anything happens to me, it will not be by chance. The truth you hide will not stay buried forever. The words struck a new chord of unease. Had her death truly been the tragedy Lucas had always claimed? Or was there more hidden in the shadows of that house? Did she know her fate before it came? The family's wounds were beginning to heal, but a new question now lingered over them like a storm cloud. What really happened the night she died? This was never just about a boy staring out of a window or whispering words no one wanted to hear. It was about Theo, his memory, his love, his persistence, and how his simple truth refused to stay buried. It was about Lucas, a father torn between pride and grief, who learned too late that silence can wound as deeply as betrayal. And it was about Maya, the maid who chose to listen when no one else would, and in doing so, uncovered a secret that reunited a broken family. This story is a reminder that love, memory, and secrets can linger in silence for years. But sometimes all it takes is one voice willing to listen to change everything. Let us know what you think about this story in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you thought this story was heartbreaking, wait until you hear the next one.